Chongqing, June 5th, 1941. The air raid siren cuts out. The heat stays put. Doors scrape open. Someone laughs, that nervous kind. The crowd packed into the big tunnel finally feels the city breathe. A warden yells, "All clear!" A man near the entrance pushes forward, desperate for air. A mother whispers to her kid, "Hold tight." Someone's ration coupon slips out and skitters across the floor. Then the far door jams. Someone stumbles. The whole crowd reverses direction at once. Shoulders crush ribs. Lantern light bounces off foreheads and rising steam. The air runs out. People claw at each other's coats. The tunnel fills with one thin, terrible cry. There's no more space. The bombs didn't kill these thousands. What killed them was what they believed. Sirens mean run. All clear means go home. Tonight, those rules reversed. Thousands never made it to the stairs. What they didn't know, 4 years earlier, in another city, a different group of people learned that the signs you trust can mean exactly the opposite of safety, and that realization kept them alive when it should have killed them. Shanghai, 1937. The river's black, the floodlights are white, and a small boat tries to slip into the darkness. Inside is a young woman, barely 20, with a square jaw and a sailor's cap pinned tight. Her name is Yang Huimin. She's carrying two things heavier than bullets, a red, white, blue flag and a reason to stay standing. The Sihang Warehouse rises out of the dark like a ship run aground. Machine guns tear up the night. Across the water, tens of thousands watch from the international settlement, close enough to hear men breathing on the roof. If Yang reaches that warehouse, a flag flies by morning. Without her, the soldiers inside keep fighting, but one more light goes out. A sentry hisses. Password? The boat slides under the warehouse wall. Yang's hands shake. She presses the cloth to her chest like it's breathing. Up on the roof, inches of concrete sit between a body and a story. An enlisted man named Chen Shusheng lies behind sandbags that still smell like grain, counting grenades one by one. He has no idea all those people across the water came to watch him live or die. All he knows for sure, he can't let the sappers through the stairwell. The all clear that should mean safety becomes a death trap in 1941. The flag that should mean nothing in a firefight becomes everything on this particular night in 1937. From the start, this was never about orders from above. It's about people who learned a rule, trusted a sign, held a piece of cloth, and then found out what those things really meant. Hold, someone growls from the roof. Yang looks up at a face streaked with brick dust. You brought it? She lifts the bundle. The city will see it in the morning. On the warehouse roof, Chen Shusheng is 21. He smells cordite and wet brick. His squad watches the stairwell where the enemy sappers will come. Floodlights sweep across. The wall shakes. Then, breathing. That means soldiers on the stairs. Hold the stair, the corporal says. The warehouse isn't much of a home, but it's a good fort. The concrete floors soak up blast shock. The thick outside walls stop rifle bullets. The roofline gives them a clean shot down the street. They drag furniture into barriers, stack sandbags that jump when bullets hit them, set up their light machine gun to cover the stairwell, and keep grenades piled everywhere. They learn to tell a sapper's footstep from a falling brick. Across the creek sits the international settlement. Some nights, 10,000 people, maybe more, pack the waterfront. Some cheer, some stare, some curse. Cameras go off constantly. They're watching, one of Chen's guys says. Let them watch. When dawn comes, it bleeds into the sky like spilled ink. Yang is on the floor, dust coating her knees. The flag climbs the pole with cold hands. Pull, someone yells. The cloth unfurls, color hanging above the wreckage. On the other bank, the crowd roars. A kid standing on a crate waves his cap. A British soldier on leave. Smoking. Looks up. Christ, they actually did it. The morning sun catches the flag and makes it shine. We needed them to see us, Yang says later, because we were still here. The day gets hot. By late afternoon, the men on the roof have stopped talking in complete sentences. A sapper team gets close enough for Chen to see their knuckles. He pulls the pin with his teeth, counts 1 to 2, throws. The hallway fills with dust and broken sound. His ears ring. His hands shake. Fewer footsteps now. We're not done, he says. Night comes, and the floodlights click on like a door slamming. The city turns to black glass. The warehouse becomes a stage. The crowd across the creek gasps when tracers light up the roof. A reporter scribbles notes. A woman whispers a prayer. Inside, the squad shifts. A bomb has torn open the south wall. The corporal runs his finger down the crack. Still holding, he says. By day 7, the air inside tastes like metal. The order comes at night, cross the creek and get out. Nobody cheers. Some argue. A guy with dust in the creases of his palms says, "We held it. We can hold one more day." But orders are orders. In the dark, with gunfire still raking the roof, they carry wounded men to the water's edge. The river looks wider than it did a week ago. The first boats push off with bullets pinging around them. An international settlement guard swears and waves for quiet. But the crowds keep pressing forward anyway. Someone on the roof salutes the flag. Someone else, practical to the end, says, "Get it down." Yang stands on the bank and watches. "It was never about the building," she says. "It was about the men. They step onto foreign pavement and don't feel safe, just watched." Camera shutters are louder than gunfire for a second. Then the moment ends. Shanghai disappears behind smoke. The war moves inland. The flag that flew for a week gets folded and packed away. 7 days in one building. One crossing in the dark. Tens of thousands of eyes across a creek just a few boat lengths wide. By 1939, Chongqing had settled into a strange new rhythm. Shops opened and closed to the sound of shutters. Kids walked to the nearest shelter like they were heading to school. When the air raid sirens went off, and they went off every morning, people just moved. No one had to tell them anymore. They'd wrap wet rags around their faces, place water buckets by the door, tape up the windows. A teacher would check her class, nod, and say, "All right, we go." Then everyone headed down into the tunnels. Adults made room for the students. The lights stayed low, the radios turned down. The whole city just held its breath while the bombers circled overhead. Chen Guifeng was young then. The scars on her forearms and scalp would later map out the city in raised white lines. She did what everyone did, packed a bundle with a cup, a blanket, an ID tag, a ration coupon, and moved whenever the siren told her to move. She kept her sense of humor small and practical. She once told a neighbor, "If you're late, bring the sweet buns anyway." The bombers came in different types and patterns, but most people didn't bother looking up to figure out which was which. Instead, they listened for the engine sound that meant the planes were circling back, or they paid attention to the quiet that meant a new wave was forming beyond the hills. The civil defense rules turned fear into habit. Black out the lamps, face away from windows, don't block the entrance, wait for the all clear. These rules worked until they didn't. A tunnel works like a lung when everything functions properly. Air flows in through doors and vents, heat rises, people line the walls, and wardens keep things moving. But close one door and open another, and the air moves through everything differently. Too many people pushing in at once makes the air thicker and hotter, carbon dioxide builds up, sweat makes the stone slippery, feet lose their grip. In that state, one small thing going wrong can turn a crowd on itself. Maybe a door that won't open, a rumor that it's not safe outside yet, or someone shouting that another exit is better. When a crowd turns in a tunnel, the geometry becomes deadly. The first people who fall become a soft barrier that feels like ground but isn't. Hot air pools near the ceiling while people lift their children up into air that can't even be breathed. The all clear is when you decide the danger has passed. On June 5, 1941, that decision broke in the worst possible way. The city had bent all day but hadn't broken. People had worked between the alerts. By evening, the big tunnel near the 18 stairs was packed solid. A warden in a cloth cap walked in circles with a whistle in his cheek. Mothers counted their children. Men leaned against the wall, trying not to check their watches. The last bombs seemed to fall a few blocks over. Then the siren wound down, the warden blew his whistle, and somebody at the door put their hand on the wood. "All clear," a boy shouted. "Home!" A dozen people smiled without meaning to. Then the hinge groaned. Someone from the far end yelled, "Not this one!" The door that was supposed to be the exit wasn't anymore. The crowd jerked. People at the front recoiled, then pressed back. The tunnel is straight until it isn't. At the bend, a woman dropped her bundle and bent down to grab it. The person behind her didn't see why she'd stopped. That was enough. That's all it took. Heat rolled up as someone tried to climb the wall. The warden blew his whistle for order, but the sound didn't make any pattern that could fix this. Once the crowd started pressing, the tunnel stopped emptying and filling properly. Within minutes, people in the center started sliding down into what became a living pile. A boy vanished from his father's arms. A shoe came off without a foot inside it. There was a thin cry, then less, then almost nothing at all. When they finally got the doors open, there were bodies where air should have been. The number people remember is large, thousands. Nearly 4,000 is what people usually say. Outside, the night wind moved and people looked at the sky like it had broken a promise. Even under those sirens, life had kept trying to be life. Street markets shortened their hours, but kept selling. Schools held morning classes. People got married during blackouts. Children memorized the turns to their shelters. The raids were professional and deliberate, hitting exactly where a city's nerves show, to disrupt work and food distribution. But the city refused to collapse. The bombing was supposed to break morale by forcing everyone into this tight routine. Instead, it created a population that moved like a single animal responding to a signal. The real disaster didn't come from a bomb, it came from a failed signal. In the years that followed, ordinary names came forward. Liu Xiaobo stood with other survivors and said, "We were told to be silent then. We will not be silent now." In 2015, in a fluorescent room, Chen Guifeng rolled up her sleeve and laid her forearm on a table covered with legal pads. The scars looked like pale vines. She said, "This is what I carried out of the tunnel, and this, tapping the pad, is how I carry it now." The lawyers took notes. Cameras clicked. A softer kind of witness than the ones along Suzhou Creek, but witness still. Years of raids had turned the siren into a metronome for daily life. By spring 1941, the alert hours had piled up like bricks. Then one night in June, all those hours ended with thousands gone in minutes. The enemy wasn't incompetent. The air units were trained, coordinated, relentless. Their strategy assumed terror would produce surrender. Instead, it produced an efficient routine, until the routine cracked. The very system meant to break spirits created habits that later filled courtrooms with calm, stubborn voices giving testimony. By August 1945, Chongqing had earned itself a normal season. Japan surrendered. Speeches offered words like peace, future, rebuild. Windows opened. Children looked up when planes passed and sometimes even smiled. But the story doesn't end there. The war ended in August 1945. Papers got signed, parades happened, rifles stacked up in fields. For a week there were sweets again. Soldiers got on trains, heading home. People finally breathed out. But your body doesn't forget so fast. The same people who'd learned to move when the sirens went, they learned just as quickly to listen for something else. A soldier's shout at a checkpoint, a knock after midnight, someone saying, "Papers, then you're coming with us." By 1946, the uniforms at the roadblocks were Chinese instead of Japanese. The names on the township office lists were Chinese too. And the orders, the ones deciding who could leave and who had to stay, those came from your actual neighbors. The old allies had split apart and picked up their guns again. A place like Liujiagu in Wenshui County felt it first, in the small, everyday ways. Attacks demanded twice over, rumors that someone was helping the wrong side. A cousin brought in for questioning, and held a day longer than necessary. But life went on anyway. Millet dried on the rooftops. Kids still got water from the well. Old people still moved their stools into the shade, because even fear gets exhausted. Liu Hulan was a teenager with a messenger bag and a face people noticed. Born in 1932, she'd grown up during the war against Japan. When the Civil War started, she took on small jobs. Deliver a note, warn someone, bring rice to a man hiding in a cave. It didn't feel heroic at the time. It felt like chores. She'd tell her mom, "I'll be home before dark," and her mom would just nod, because those words were normal, even though nothing else was. Then soldiers came at dawn with a list and a map. They put up posts on every lane to keep people from running to the fields. An officer called out names while a clerk wrote them down. Men got separated into different groups while the women watched, Search teams went through every house with their hands behind their backs so they couldn't be accused of stealing. Another team stabbed through every haystack with bayonets. If they found a leaflet or a cup that looked military, they held it up like it was a gun. January 12, 1947. The wind was harsh enough to cut. People pulled their collars tight. A drum sounded once, low and slow. The guards had rope. They read names and tied knots that made sense of those names. Liu Hulan was 14 years old. She stepped up onto a plank laid across two stools and didn't look down. Someone in the crowd coughed loud on purpose to cover a cry. A sergeant asked her for names. She said no. Not a speech, just one small word, barely between a breath and a shake. No. He tried again. She said, "Better to die than betray." Her mother was somewhere in the crowd and felt the earth move under her feet. The rope was rough. Cold-made hands slip. 6 villagers died with her that day. The drums hit twice, then 3 times, then stopped. A group that wouldn't kneel when ordered and then wouldn't get back up. Children watched from the edges because the guards made them. One boy took off his cap and gripped it so hard it warped. 2 months later, a plaque arrived. A great life, a glorious death. The bones in the ground don't care about politics, but the words on a wall do. That line is short enough for schoolchildren to memorize and carry home. When the yard cleared out, the village stayed quiet for a week. Then work started again. Millet had to be threshed. Someone's baby needed a doctor. People talked in doorways again. The next day came, like it always does in wartime. 6 people, not 1. The symmetry makes it a lesson. 12 to 18 months, that's how fast things went from national victory to people dying in the yard. That's the speed of collapse, measured in lives, not on any map. And one plaque's inscription reaches millions of students who'll take those words home and speak them at dinner. So, here's the question. Who decides which names survive? It's spring, 1947. We're in Wenshui County, and a class of students is standing on stone while their guide points at a wall. One student reads aloud in that thin, clear voice kids have. A great life, a glorious death. Those words belonged to a girl. She had rope around her wrists. 6 neighbors stood close enough to touch her. The teacher says a name, then another. The names just keep coming, like a rhythm you could walk to. Fast forward decades. We're in Chongqing now, in a room with flickering fluorescent lights, the kind of cold that gets into your bones. Metal chairs in a row, a microphone on a cloth-covered table. Chen Guifeng sits there with her hands folded. Then she unfolds them just enough to show the scars. They told us to go home after the all clear, she says. So we did. We did what we were told. She touches the paper in front of her. And now we're telling you what happened. The lawyer nods and slides a form toward her. Chen writes her name slowly, each stroke careful and deliberate. Across the room, a man holds up a photograph of Gao Rongbin. He's smiling. 94 years old, the man says softly. What starts as a story you tell your neighbor becomes a story you tell your grandchild. Then you're telling it to a stranger with a notebook. A petition appears, a name at the top, a date at the bottom. They file it, nothing happens. They file it again. There's a meeting, 2 minutes at a microphone. You count the people in the room. You look at the door. We won't stop. Years go by. Your voice becomes something they can't just throw away. Here's the thing. The opposite of a bomb is a form. The opposite of a form is a body in a square. A country's built from all 3, whether it admits it or not. At the beginning, they said all clear meant you were safe. But safety isn't a siren or words over a loudspeaker. Safety is concrete where you need it. Laws that don't lie. Names on a wall that tell the truth when people want to forget. A flag flying over a roofline won't stop a city from falling. But it keeps a heart from breaking when that heart has to climb stairs in the dark. Executions are supposed to scare a village into obedience. Instead, they teach children how to say a name without fear. That all clear that killed people becomes a warning, even in quiet rooms. Don't mistake silence for peace. The flag that flew over concrete shows what symbols can actually do. They don't hold buildings together. They hold people together. The comrades who fought an invader become enemies in a civil war. But the people who learned to move together under sirens learned to speak together under lights. Nearly 70 years between the tunnel and this meeting, thousands stood in that tunnel, dozens are signing today. That gap, thousands down to dozens, should hit you hard, because dozens can push a story across a room and into a book and onto a wall where school children stand and read those words out loud. The siren's off. The door's open. You can go home. But you know better than to take all clear at face value. You've learned to look for what's really behind the words. Stand by the water at night in Shanghai. Breathe in the coal smoke from roasted chestnuts. You can almost hear the crowd across Suzhou Creek. Almost see cloth snapping in that cold dawn wind. That sound isn't victory. It's survival. It's why people made it through one war and then, impossibly, through the next one.